Hello, 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 everybody. I'm England in the United States and Hungary. Um, I want to welcome especially Emese Moritz, who, among other things, is a student of Thomas Hubel. I think I said his name right. And she's also involved.
Senior student.
Sorry?
Senior student.
Okay. I'm not even going to try. But in any event, she's also an expert in something called, what is it? Echo business? No, business. Boy, I'm tongue-tied today.
Here, I can. I got
Yeah,
this
please,
set up.
please.
Yeah. Well, she looks like she's got a nice consulting, training, and coaching background with 20 years experience in business and development. She has a focus on female leaders for the future, which is very interesting, and finding ways for living a more sustainable life. She started her own program that intertwines spirituality, neuroscience, and leadership, which I'm interested in. Neurobusiness is the word. But yeah, I'll get right to it. My first question, kind of want to continue on what we were talking about last week, is as far as through your journey in neuroscience and spirituality, are there any specific practices that have made like a really big impact or have been very helpful for you? I remember when I think Angela asked if you have a spiritual practice. I think you said it was deep and consistent, I believe was your answer. So I'm just interested in what practices you have developed over your years.
Yes, that's a good question because, wow. Okay, let me let me see how I can summarize it really briefly because I've got roughly 15 years, roughly 15 years of spiritual path experience, and first I got an initiation in the Himalayan Yoga Tradition. I don't know if you are familiar with this one. Swami Rama was one of the main gurus of this tradition, and why is it so special compared to other traditions? Because as far as I know, they were the first one who put themselves under test. And while they were meditating, they had all kinds of devices in their head. And they really wanted to prove scientifically what happens in the meditator's brain. So, but when I met Thomas Hubel, definitely my whole spiritual journey accelerated, and it made a kind of major turn. And what I learned from Thomas, that speaking about spirituality, reading about spirituality is definitely not enough. So 100% reading and 99% of practicing. This is the right average and percentage. And what I especially learned during these last 6 years from him, that if we are not able to connect our mind and our heart with our bodies, then it will be only, a kind of conceptual spirituality that is just running around in our head. So all the types of meditation that I learned from him and that I'm practicing is a kind of embodied meditation. So how to connect back to our bodies and how to use our bodies as a resource. It's not easy, but it's not so difficult. And during my program, when I'm teaching, especially people who are fairly familiar with all the meditations, and when I teach the first type of meditation, okay, connect to your breath, connect to your bodies, connect to your pelvis, your pelvic area. And they said, no, I'm not going back to the origin. Yes, but you have to. And after a few weeks of practice, they can immediately realize the real change, how they can really feel whatever is happening with them in their bodies, and how they can really use the wisdom of the body. Is this enough?
That's very interesting to me. So I guess so the bulk of your practices are in meditation.
Meditation, reading sacred texts, so very important when you are at a level, because I don't know who is having this kind of practice, that from time to time you just take a book and you try to contemplate on some sacred lines. Who is having this kind of practice? No? None of you?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yes, because this is also very, and what is your experience then, Angelo, when you really want to tune into these sacred texts?
Well, my own experience is that sometimes the experience thing takes over, and I mean I don't mean it in a necessarily good way. So in other words, I can become very repetitive in what I'm doing, and it's useful to like read something or to get some sort of guidance as to what it is to help me to reorient, and that's just my experience, I guess, to put it simply. I do have a follow-up question, though, because I don't think most people here are familiar with Thomas's work. And I wonder if you could say something a little bit about it. I recently bought his newest book.
Yeah, Healing Collective Trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Thomas Hübel is a contemporary spiritual teacher. He himself is a combination of science and spirituality, because originally he was a medical student in the Austrian Medical University, and I think just before he got his diploma, he had a huge call that he needs to do something different. So he decided to take a 4 years meditation retreat. This is how he calls it. I just went on a 4-year meditation retreat, and he was contemplating, he was meditating, and he was really experiencing everything that was written down in several spiritual books. And after the fourth year, something happened. And this is how he calls it, that after the 4th year, by the end of the 4th year, something happened. I think he had a huge initiation there, or enlightenment. And when he came back to the real life, to the marketplace, this is how he calls it, then immediately he got some invitations to participate in spiritual congresses, and then within 1 or 2 years he was participating in delivering workshops and teaching, and in almost 20 years ago he founded the Academy of Inner Science. It is based in Germany. But there is a US affiliate, and now he lives in Israel with his wife. And now he turns towards collective trauma and trauma healing, which is a very strong interlink between spirituality, science, and also the evolvement of humanity. So is this enough about Thomas? If you are interested, I highly recommend to Google for him, because he is really great, and he has lots of YouTube videos, and there is a kind of mystic cafe if you want to sign up. So there is a monthly talk from Thomas that is absolutely open, and there are so many daily practices that you can do. I can't hear you.
You're on mute.
I'm mute.
Angelo.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of maybe, this is a question for both you and Jim. So I know Thomas's work and other people's work talks about trauma. And I wonder if both of you could address the nature of trauma and it's the brain and sort of like the neurobiology of trauma, which I
Yes.
think is an important element.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So basically, this was is this okay, Jim, if I start? Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So basically, this was my path too. The reason why I started to dig deeper into human behavior, what is happening in our brain, what is happening in our body, what is happening in our soul. Because I started as a corporate trainer based on cognitive behavior approach. And well, anyway, I don't want to go into that very, very deeply, but it is based on the behavior as we are perceiving it. And if we are skillful enough, we can learn new techniques and we can use it in practice shortly. But it never worked like this. It really never worked like this. Especially it never worked when people get under stress, or maybe they were triggered or whatever. And it was so, palpable, nearly for everyone, that it just struck my mind. And I said, okay, what is happening then? How can it happen that, highly intelligent people, when they are learn, for example, how to communicate assertively? This is very simple, but they are just simply not able to use it when they are under stress. So, and there is a kind of crossroad in our mind, in our brain. And if we are going under stress, then what we have learned, for example, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it completely disappears. It is just like if you have never learned anything in your life. And what comes up? Your habitual way of speaking, reacting, living, that comes from your limbic system, which means this is a kind of more ancient part of the brain. And what is the difference? What makes the difference is really the trauma, and especially the trauma that hasn't been integrated in our lives. So it is absolutely essential to know our history, to know what we have learned from our family, because sometimes we are just repeating, the type of behaviors or communication phrases what we have learned from our families. And yes, the deep inner work is also very, very essential, especially when you are doing the embodied meditation. Then you can really feel. But for example, something happens in the street, and you are with some people. For some of them, it is just like nothing. But for you, you get so frightened that you are not able to speak or move on or whatever. And the difference is, what is happening within us. Okay, was this clear?
Yeah, that's a good start. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, your turn.
Jim.
Well, one of my areas of focus, interest, has always been that most of the research on the brain focuses on the suffering of the human being. And my interest is in the growth, the evolution, the expansion of the human being. And so I've spent most of my study on how we become more rather than how outside events turn us into something less than who we can be. So I'm not really an expert on trauma. However, having said that, I'm reminded of Emese's comments on how important meditation on the body and the bodily processes is. Because many of us take the body for granted, in a sense. And, you know, the body is this extraordinary organism that, with the brain's very intimate involvement, is maintained in what we call homeostasis. In other words, in the body, all of our various organs and processes are held in harmony with one another, purely because of the nature of the body, not because you and I ever think about it. It just goes on like that. And so what Emese was saying is that awareness of the body is very important as a sort of settling in process to become more familiar with all of who we are. And, from my view, learn to express gratitude for this extraordinary organism that maintains homeostasis so that all of us can sit here like we are and pay attention and feel good and, you know, look forward to this and enter into a conversation. In a traumatic experience, that homeostasis is dramatically disrupted. That's one of the things we've learned from neuroscience, that the biochemical situation in the body that's more or less normalized when we feel good is completely out of whack. And that has significant negative impacts on all of, in a sense, that all of how the body is functioning in those moments. And it can have a lasting impact. For me, what's most important in this is the trauma in a child can have an impact for the rest of his or her life. That when a child experiences this kind of dramatic shift in bodily and mental functioning, it can, in a sense, deposit itself in the brain in a way that we remember throughout life that traumatic event. And whenever something outside of us triggers that memory, that trauma can come back again. And so, you know, neuroscience has given us an insight into how these, in a sense, illnesses, sicknesses, shifts from homeostasis can have both a short-term and a lifelong impact on who we are, who we can become. At the same time, neuroscience shows us that with what Emese was saying, with a certain kind of meditation and awareness on the body, the brain can be restructured in a way that the long-term effects of that trauma can be mitigated and disappear completely in our lives.
So we have a question from Mint, which is kind of germane to what we're talking about here. He or she asks, how do we get over that trauma from a scientific standpoint?
Yeah, I can answer this.
Good.
I can answer this.
I could have answered it, but I'll let you do it.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
It's your turn.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, to be honest, I don't like the word get over, because when we are under a trauma, or when a trauma hits us, okay, yes, and so we are just shutting down some parts from in our system, in our brain. It was scientifically proven that when we are shutting down the painful parts in our soul, then a part of our brain is also shut down. So what we can do that we can integrate it. Okay, we can release all the trauma, all the energy that forms a blockage after the trauma, and throughout this process, the trauma was integrated. In the symposium, I was talking about the 4 characters that is built in our brain that we are born with. If you remember, Angelo, it is a very new discovery that was made by Dr. Geobolti Taylor, and she said that every single person is born with 4 built-in characters in our brain. Okay, and there are myths that we need to really think over, because the one myth is that the left brain is our logical brain and the right brain is our emotional brain. And it is totally incorrect as far as this new discovery stated. There is a logical part in our right brain as well, and there is an emotional part in our left brain too. So there are 2 amygdalas and 2 hippocampi in our brain, and these 4 characters are based on the left thinking, the left feeling, or the right thinking, or the right feeling type of character. And the left feeling character is the second character that is called the shadow in which all the past kind of traumatic events are stored. Okay, some of the spiritual traditions called it ego, but Jung calls it shadow. And definitely some of the memories will be still stored there, but what we can really change is the effect of the memory as it hits us and our relation towards this memory. Because yes, we will remember that something really bad happened to us, but it will not generate such an emotional and physiological reaction in our brain and also in our body. Is this okay?
Yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up. I know I'm doing all the talking here. Anybody else wants to jump in, please do. One of the things we didn't talk about in the seminar is, I believe I'm calling it, the word is epigenetics. So I understand that there's trauma, but it seems like trauma is passed on from generation to generation, no? And what does this look like, maybe medically or scientifically? And yes, isn't it important really to try to bring this in if we're going to not just cure ourselves, but cure our families and our
Yes. There are scientific researches based on this epigenetic trauma, and there is one very interesting woman. She's originally French, Isabelle Mansuy. I can write it in the chat. So can I write? So you will. I don't have permission for that.
Yes, you should.
Anyway, I have.
Yeah, you should. You should. Because Min has been writing in the chat, so I don't see why you can't.
Mansuy. Isabelle Mansuy.
There you go. Yeah.
She's based now in Geneva, and this is her main research area. And she is using small rats, unfortunately, which is definitely not so nice. But they are they are the closest to human beings. Anyway, and what she did during her research was that when the pups were born, and they were only a few days old, for a very, very short time, they were put into cold water, which is a kind of trauma. And they, of course, then they were taken out. And then they took some DNA sample out of their blood and examined. And there was a significant change in their DNA. Okay? And the reciprocity is quite quick. So there are pops coming quite easily or soon. And although the pops, their children didn't go through this kind of cold water trauma, but the modified DNA was there in their system. And whatever, they did another research. They just took out the modified DNA and put it into rats that had never gone through, all this trauma. And when the modified DNA was put in their blood, they started to show these kind of behavior reactions. So yes, it goes. It is inherited from generation to generation, and but it can be integrated. And when we are going through these processes, then it somehow restore our original DNA as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'll add a couple of thoughts. First of all, when we talk about epigenetics, it's only been in recent years that we've actually recognized that, in a sense, the mind-brain can affect our genetic expression, not structure, but the expression of our genes. So in that context, we really don't know yet the incredible extent to which this can be, in a sense, adjusted over time. It's very much like the opposite of COVID. COVID evolves literally in hours. We evolve in hundreds of thousands of years. And so that's one point. The second thing is that when we talk about trauma, the ultimate trauma has impacted our genetic structure beginning around 200,000 years ago, when the negativity bias became implanted in our entire system as a way of evolution, giving us an advantage in the struggle for survival over time. So the negativity bias of the brain is, in a sense, an epigenetic development over hundreds of thousands of years. So, and what that has done has created a certain kind of structural formation in the brain that responds more to negativity than to positivity. And it's held, in the brain stem, where this sort of evolutionary development has happened over a long time, but it's still there, okay? Now, so that's one thing. The second thing we've learned from neuroscience is that so far, without limit, using a certain kind of first awareness, then attention, then intention, like Emese was saying in the beginning, we can restructure our brain, both in form and function. So if I'm a little 5-year-old person and I have an extraordinary trauma in my life, that event has shifted my neural structure in a way that it is to some degree embedded in my brain, okay? And another event 50 years later may bring that out. And so in a sense, that trauma is with me forever. However, what we now know about the brain is with the appropriate, in a sense, mental tools, we can change that structure and rid ourselves of that trauma. So it doesn't have to be passed on to generations. It is often passed on because nobody does anything about it. But what we know about neuroscience is that we can all participate in the restructuring of our neural formations in such a way that it changes even the most dramatic and dire experiences and feelings and responses that anyone has ever had. So it's not forever, unless we want to settle for being today who we were yesterday. You see, the opportunity, which Emese described in her opening comments, the opportunity is today, becoming aware of so much of this, being aware of the body through meditation, immersing yourself into the whole system we call the human being, and participating in such a way that we restructure our internal design, if you will, so that many of these awful memories and traumas can be erased from the brain because we've changed the way the neural structure that held those memories is now different than it was before. That's the possibility. I'm not saying that it's easy to do and people do it all the time, et cetera. And Rick Hansen, who's one of the better neuroscientists, meditation practitioners, and therapists, neurotherapists, says that, you know, the best way to do this is you have a negativity bias, you replace those negative thoughts with positive feelings, and you install those positive feelings in the body over time, and it begins to change your brain in a certain way. And once that begins to happen, you can then, in that positive state, bring in your traumatic experience and perhaps begin to deal with that. But as he says, do not do that alone. When you move into a deeply traumatic experience, you need to be working with someone who can assist you in moving through that. It's too, like what you all are indicating, it's too powerful for us to just do it on our own, since we're just early pioneers in this whole field. Anyway, those are my comments. Emese, what do you think? Did I say anything that's dramatically incorrect? I'm making all this up, you know, as we go along.
No, I think it was absolutely great. And yeah, and Thomas always says that whenever something happens to us and we were children, then definitely there is a kind of reaction by which we learn to manage the situation or manage the people around us. And so our behavior and our reaction to that became our habit. And most of us who is feeling some kind of shame around all these kind of old habits that are very, very difficult to get rid of. Most of us. It's not okay. Sometimes you feel that, oh my goodness, you know, after all these years of deep inner work and meditation and learning, sometimes I'm just, you know, in my old shit. And he always says that whenever we create these behaviors or type of behaviors or reaction, we are doing it with that age intelligence. Okay, so we need to be partly proud of it, because this was the best thing that we could do at that time. And sometimes it is just, well, it's definitely not easy. So I'm absolutely seconding what Jim said, that why can't we just honor this, that at that time, this was our level of intelligence, and now we can allow ourselves to use everything that is around, okay? And one thing is definitely sure, that it is absolutely impossible to do it alone, because you need guidance. The biggest trauma for human beings is that at that time when something happened to us, we felt alone. Okay, and we felt that we were totally lost. we were absolutely abandoned, and then, rewriting this relational loop is a part of trauma integration. Okay, and sometimes you do not have to go to a kind of psychiatrist or a trauma therapist. Sometimes it can happen in a meditation retreat if the facilitator or the teacher is trained enough. But definitely the safe and open and heart-centered connection is really healing just by itself.
Yeah, one last thing to follow up on Emese's is, to me, it points out how important community is in this work. Like Sacred Inclusion Networks of building, for example. But when Emese asks that question, how many of us feel such and such, you see people raise their hand. And that's what we need. We carry through the day this feeling of, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm shamed, and we forget that everybody else has a part of that as well. So when we're in community, we feel better about what we felt bad about ourselves earlier, because we realize it's just normal. We're human and we have work to do. One of my first meditation teachers was a man named Michael Murphy, who started Esalen Institute. And he used to say to me, your neurosis is your practice. Yeah. That's where your biggest growth comes, by recognizing the neurotic side of who we are and then moving into it and learning how to transform it into our strength. Because like they say, the shadow has extraordinary power. And as we can dance with it, romance it, bring it into the light, that power becomes a part of our lightness rather than our darkness. And the community really helps. So Angelo and Ian particularly, and Richard, nice to see you again. The Sacred Inclusion Network is one of those communities that I think is important to this sort of work. So thank you all for doing this.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I have I wanted to get to practice type things, but I wanted to ask one question, because I know Emese knows about neuro business, and this is like a kind of a new word for me. I mean, I kind of get neuro and business, but just tell us something about that, if you don't mind.
Yes. Well, definitely, it is all about how to apply the scientific researches and neuroscience into business. And one of the most extraordinary person that is representing this is Dr. Srini Pillai. Have you heard about him? Dr. Srini Pillai? Just Google him, because he has brilliant presentations and TED Talks, and also why I appreciate him, because I think he's bringing hope too, either in trauma integration, but also how to use our brain in a way that every step and every thought becomes a kind of possibility for us, a kind of possibility way of thinking, instead of fear-based thinking that is, a kind of decreased vision about ourselves. So, just to tell you one example, as the COVID started, he just had a lecture about how to transform our negativity into possibility. Okay, and he talked a lot about the amygdala and also the different parts of our brain. That is just like we had been preparing ourselves for our own death. This was his main concept, because most of the time, okay, we know that we are getting born. Hopefully we have a kind of life, a kind of longer, not even shorter, and then we die. But death as itself, it is just not in our consciousness, that we can die basically any day. And this was the concept around his talk, and he presented a kind of method in order to learn how to deal with this predatory fear, because it is just like and I can connect with this to Jim, this negativity bias. So our brain was subconsciously were triggered moment by moment with this thought that I can die any moment. I can die any moment. Fear is here. Death is here. So this was the fear that we were living through, or maybe I don't know what is the situation now in the US, but here in Hungary we are talking about the fourth wave that is already here, and so it is just definitely not normal to have our death in front of our face. And there are very, very simple methods and tools how to junk this fear and how to bring it to a cognitive level, and how to get over with it, and in the end look at this threat as a kind of opportunity to grow.
Okay, but there's a connection with business somewhere in there, or you wouldn't use that word.
Of course, in business you need to be possibility oriented. You need to be solution oriented. But there is one very important thing: you cannot shut down the fears, and you cannot shut down the negative, emotions that is on the surface. Because when you are doing it so, this means that the mind will rather fall back into this scarcity type of operation.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ann. You're on mute.
You hear me? Still now?
Now we're good.
Better.
Okay. Cool. Well, first I just wanted to open it up. If anyone else, Richard, Lorraine, if Mint had any other question, you guys are here. If not, Angelo, you can kind of go with what you wanted to.
Yes,
You're on mute. You're on mute.
You're mute.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all very interesting, and I know we've all had to deal with trauma. I don't know. Can I indicate? Can I tell them who I am?
Sure.
Can I tell them who I am? Ian?
Yes.
Okay. I am Ian's mother. Okay. And and it's really interesting, I guess in a more concrete level, Ian and I have been talking. Ian and I have both experienced trauma, and in terms of passing down our trauma, my trauma to Ian, it's really uncanny, how it has actually worked. And we've been talking, about that to make it more concrete, more concrete. It's interesting that basically Ian's father was my mother. So it was similar to my mother. So Ian had to deal with a father who was not there all the time, So we're in the process of dealing with that. So all of this is very interesting. And what you're saying too, I think, about integrating it, I think. you can never get rid of it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to tell Ian. I don't know. Ian was with his father towards when he died. Ian took care of him. And I think that's really very important for him. It's not anything bad. It's not anything bad. It's part of who we are. It's part of who Ian and I are. And I forget who she was. I don't know. Do you know Carrie Fisher, Debbie Reynolds' daughter? She was into drugs. Did you know who Carrie Fisher is? Does anybody know who Carrie Fisher is?
Yeah, of course.
Oh.
I know who Debbie Reynolds was too.
Okay. Carrie Fisher was into drugs. She was Debbie Reynolds' daughter, and she was nutty as a fruitcake, but she was into drugs and all sorts of things. But she was very proud of that. It was part of her. It wasn't that she was proud of it, but she used it. She used it for who she was. So I think that's, you can never be ashamed of who you are, and what you experienced. Just don't be ashamed of it, because it develops into to something. It's who you are. It's who you are. And you can channel it to make it more, to make it more positive. So you have to, I think, and I don't know how her first name, how you say it.
Emese.
Emese?
Ultimately, you have to integrate it. You have to integrate it to who you are. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I'm trying to take what you're saying to my situation.
Yeah, and I think you're making absolute sense. And I would say there are other possibilities now.
Can you tell that to Ian?
It's like, and it doesn't mean it's easy or everyone should or can do it, but it's sort of like I have a little course I'm doing on changing my habits, because habits are related to your identity, who you believe, what you are, etc. And you can shift that a bit by developing different habits. And one of the things this man says is there are no good or bad habits. There are only behaviors that keep you who you are, or behaviors that move you toward whom you want to become. And that's a choice we make. As I said, if I want to be tomorrow who I was yesterday, I do nothing, because I will continue to be the same. However, what we know from neuroscience, and it's very elementary, I mean, this is all new stuff and we don't understand it completely, though some people believe they do, is that we can change some of that. Now, whether that means you completely rid yourself of the traumatic event, I have no idea. I mean, what we do know is that with certain neuroscience-inspired practices, and which relate to, more and more modern contemplative techniques that have been practiced for thousands of years and adapted to the modern world, that we can become, in a sense, we can grow into an image of whom we want to become if we want to be different from who we are today. But in order to do that, a first step is, who do you want to be? And many of us want to be just who we are and continue to live the life we live. Other people want to live in a different kind of life and world. And so they lay out, I want to be this, and I want to have this, and I want to do that. For example, Lorraine, I'm doing a course now on money, and our unconscious beliefs that limit us to a certain financial attainment, let's say. Not that we all have to have it, but for me, it's about understanding what those beliefs are. And a part of that is writing an autobiography of my relationship with money. And so just that process has unveiled to me experiences I've had in my life related to money that I never thought about before, and that are a part of who I am today in relationship to finance. And all of that isn't who I want to be. You know, like, for example, we did this practice on abundance. Write down everything that is abundant in your life. And a couple of my things was credit card debt. I have an abundance of credit card debt. And it's sort of like, but I don't want that. But it's been with me a long, long time. It's not huge, and it's not so much a burden because my current income allows me to pay it every month, but it has been there for years. And so a part of my autobiography is looking at it and saying, is that who I really want to be in relation to my credit cards and my finances, et cetera? And, you know, I'm changing that by tiny financial habits, a little thing every day. So that's just an answer to your point that this is who we are. This is who I am, and this is who I'll be. And I'm just saying that's true, and we can become something more if we want to. And to me, that's the challenge for the human race. You see, if we want to be the same tomorrow as we are today, then basically science is showing us the world is coming to an end. And human civilization is going to go, the human species is going to go extinct. That's what science is telling us today. If we continue doing tomorrow what we are doing today. And that isn't the only choice for the future, but we have to be willing to change some things in the way we are in relation to nature and et cetera. And I think we can. Neuroscience is showing us we can, but we have to decide we want to do it differently. I remember there was a comment the other day, as you may know, in the US, the Republican side of the political parties have largely been in denial about climate change. And recently a group of Republican senators got together and said, well, we now recognize that, yes, probably climate change exists, it's having an impact on us, and it's human caused. However, if we do anything about not burning oil, it'll ruin our economy. So we can't get rid of our oil industry. So, you know, we all have these choices as we see where we want to go. And then we see, you know, I'm just interested in living till 2050 so I can see how the human race turned out, you know.
I want to mention, in case we don't get it in, that starting September 9th, because this is recorded, right? So we have, 6 people here, but other people might listen to this. Jim and Emese, and also Matthew Robertson and Jordan Quiglia are doing a 4-session course for the Ubiquity University that you can register for. With the video that I'll make, I'll send a link to you that you can get a discount to do. It's going to be great, and there's a lot that you can get out of it. I wanted to mention that because we might easily forget it. We have another 5 minutes. I wonder if there's any other questions or comments anyone else make, because I sure have been hogging the time.
Yeah, Richard, you haven't said anything so far?
Oh, it's just all been kind of like really interesting. I really like what you said about like embodying meditation. I've heard that from other people to say about that. You know, otherwise it just becomes an experience, and you don't kind of really live it. You've got to kind of really embody it. And certainly, like from my teachers at my temple, like that's pretty much what they teach. So, yeah, that was kind of really interesting to hear that come from someone else as well. And it's been really, it's all really, I find all this stuff so interesting. And I completely agree with Jim. Like we can do things about climate change. We really, really can. We just got to want to be able to do it. And that's why I think all of spirituality is so important, because, you know, it comes from realizing there's something more than just us, you know what I mean? And I think that's what's key to it. But that's just my feelings anyway.
Yeah, the other thing that really stood out for me, that Emese and Jim both talked about the importance of community, you know, because there's lots of things we just basically cannot do alone. And with numbers, we can have this synergistic effect that changes the whole thing. What did they used to talk about back in the old days, Jim? The 100 monkeys phenomena, to Ken Kesey's thing?
You're on mute, Jim.
Muted.
And as Lorraine was pointing out, she and I grew up with the era of the Lone Ranger, you know, where the culture impressed, especially upon men, that you do it alone. And then you ride off in the sunset on your steed and everyone celebrates you for being the Lone Ranger.
Good point.
And, you know, and that's a cultural conditioning that we have to overcome in order to do the kind of work that we can do together, and that is limited if we try and do it alone. So, and poor Tonto. But anyway.
Yeah, Angelo was in that era as well.
No, not me. To you guys. All right,
Well,
so go ahead.
And Eddie, I also remember Eddie Fisher, Lorraine.
Oh my gosh. Eddie Fisher, Jesus.
Well, I noticed that today, and Lorraine, you probably experienced something similar to what I do. I noticed today that the drummer from the Rolling Stones died today.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
and
I'm
he
sure
was one
Angelo
of
too.
he was one of the greatest drummers in rock and roll history. You know, so I always, and when I look at it, he was 80. So I look at, how old was I when he was drumming? And I was excited, you know, and I realized, God, I was older than I thought, you know.
Well, Jim, though, don't just pinpoint me. You've got to pinpoint Angelo too. I know that Angelo is older than I am.
You know, if we don't die, then we just get old. So
Yeah.
All right.
So we're going to be back at least one more time. Hopefully, maybe Matthew Robertson can join us, and
Yes.
hopefully we get some other folks around. This has been great. This is I've really enjoyed this a lot, and I want to thank both Jim and Emese. This has been just wonderful.
yeah, thank you very much. Next week I'm not able to participate, but hopefully Matt can substitute me.
Ian is working on him, I think.
Yeah, he can't make it.
He can't make it either.
No, he's still he said he's on the road. I don't know where he is, but I think he's having some sort of adventure.
Yes.
Jim will have no trouble filling the time.
Okay, so
All right, my friends.
thanks very much for your questions and your presence here. And yeah, just enroll the course, because I think it will be really interesting. We will have time for practices and going deeper into these kind of topics. So highly welcome all of you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
This is great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so much.